Being knowledgeable about a subject gives you a better chance of grasping its complexities than the average person. However, that doesn't guarantee you'll be able to solve every mystery it presents. This holds true across all fields of science. Even the most brilliant minds can be left puzzled by certain phenomena, events, or discoveries, moments when all their expertise offers no clear answers. Watch this video and you'll understand what we mean. When you were a child, you might have played with toy cars. If you did, that's something you had in common with children in the Bronze Age. The car didn't exist back then, of course, so instead, they played with tiny model chariots like this one. This remarkable, intricately detailed toy is thought to be about 5,000 years old. It was discovered in Sogmatar, Turkey, in 2017. Archaeologists found it inside a child's tomb, where they also found a rattle with birds carved into its surface. It's likely that toys like this were only available to the children of high-ranking people, and were probably made to order, as opposed to being on the shelves of a local shop. The age of the toy is important because it takes us closer to the time when most historians believe the wheel was invented in Mesopotamia 5,500 years ago. We're told that wheels back then were solid discs of wood, and it's only around 4,000 years ago that lighter, hollow wheels started to appear. If this toy is 5,000 years old, it suggests that carriages and lightweight wheels existed long before we thought they did. It seems we can no longer even say when the wheel was invented with any certainty. In 2016, UNESCO announced that the mysterious dolmens of Antequera in Spain were to be given World Heritage status. It's a fitting recognition for these ancient wonders, and it's to be hoped that the extra attention they receive because of it might kickstart the process of solving the mysteries they present. There are 3 monuments at this ancient site: the Vieira Dolmen, the Mengda Dolmen, and the Tholos of El Romeral. Most historians and archaeologists agree that they were built during the Bronze Age, some 5,000 years ago. Each of them aligns with the summer and winter solstices, but it's thought that their alignment with the curiously shaped mountain Pena de los Enamorados was just as important to their builders. The heaviest of the stones at the site weighs 180 tons. The heaviest of all the stones at Stonehenge in England is just 40 tons. Scientists have no idea how stones of this size were transported to the site and then manipulated into place because the stone isn't local. Each of the dolmens is an ancient burial site, but the identities of the many people buried inside them are unknown. Kbal Speen is one of many ancient sites that tourists should go out of their way to see if they ever visit Cambodia. The riverbed here is covered in Hindu carvings, and those carvings can be found both above and beneath the water. The origins of these carvings are shrouded in mystery. It's likely, but not proven, that the first of them were created in the 11th century. They range in design from simple to sophisticated, with cobbles as the most basic hand-carved shapes here, and the most ornate being representations of Hindu deities created as reliefs on the rocks. The presence of the gods has earned Kbal Speen the nickname Valley of 1,000 Lingas. Many of the carved circular shapes were probably also representations of Shiva at one point, but time and running water have turned them into smooth lumps. This is such an elaborate site that it looks almost as if it might have been created as a setting for the latest Indiana Jones movie. But it's all real. It's a spectacular place to see, but a hard one to understand. While we're talking about things that happened 5,000 years ago, that's also about the same time that a so-called graveyard of the giants was laid down in China. The skeletal remains of the individuals buried in it were discovered in July 2017. They wouldn't be considered giants by modern standards, but the people who lived here appear to have been more than 6 feet tall more often than they weren't. That's an unusual trait in the China of today, and is likely to have been even more unusual trait 5,000 years ago, during China's Neolithic era. How so many of these unusually tall people came to be gathered in one place close to what's now Jiaojia village in Jinan City is unknown. There are 205 graves in total, buried amid 104 houses, and what might be up to 20 sacrificial pits. It's likely that these people were members of the Longshan culture, also known as the Black Pottery culture, who arrived here 6,000 years ago and stayed for around 2,000 years. Scientists think that their unusual height might have been due to low population density and access to protein-rich big game animals. But that's far from proven. Beaches must be good places to go looking for hard-to-explain discoveries. Here's another one from Palm Beach, Florida. It was discovered by environmentalists Heather Boland and Brian Galvin in April 2019, and they have some pretty strong suspicions about what it might be. If they're right, this strange disc-shaped object is a fish aggregating device. It's a special kind of float used by fishermen to attract the tuna, marlin, and mahi-mahi that swim in these waters. The only thing stopping them from saying it's definitely a fish aggregating device is that they've seen such devices before, and they're generally made of wood, whereas this is plastic. The objects come with netting attached to the underside, within which a small ecosystem is created to attract small fish. Those small fish, in turn, attract the larger fish that the fishing companies want to catch. An onboard GPS system keeps the company informed of the fad's location, so they can head out to them periodically and sweep up whatever's there. There's no sign of a GPS tracker or a net attached to this device. That doesn't mean it didn't have them once. The ruins of Casa Grande, which are close to Coolidge in Arizona, USA, are recognized as an American national monument. The structure is the greatest and best-known work of the Hohokam people, who historians like to call the masters of the desert. They lived here during the 13th century and displayed advanced knowledge of construction and engineering, creating irrigation canals and caliche structures in the middle of the desert. Casa Grande is the most accomplished of those caliche structures. It's a watchtower 4 stories high and made of layer after layer of caliche, weighing over 3,000 tons in total. The walls are crumbling now, but they still line up with the positions of celestial bodies at important ceremonial times of the year. The roof was once supported by juniper, pine, and fir beams that came from more than 50 miles away. There are local trees in the desert, so using this wood rather than the desert trees was a deliberate choice made for reasons we can't comprehend. We also have no idea what actually went on inside Casa Grande when it was in use. It's time to check out another mysterious sea creature. This time it's one that washed ashore at Wolf Island National Wildlife Refuge in South Georgia, USA, in March 2018. The creature is so unusual that some experts have dismissed it as a high-quality hoax carried out by ingenious pranksters. The unclassified creature, which appeared to be in a state of advanced decomposition when it was found, looks a little like a frilled shark. It can't be a frilled shark, though, because it doesn't have gill slits. Marine biologist Quentin White of Jacksonville University is convinced it was a fake or a practical joke, but admits that it was a very good one. The Altamaha is said to live or have lived in this part of the state. There's no serious suggestion that this is the cadaver of the mythical beast, but it could be the reason that someone staged a cadaver to look like it. Pictures were sent to the Smithsonian for examination, but the institution made no public comments about them. To add to the sense of mystery, the creature vanished before it could be taken away for further examination. Cant in Russia is a sight to behold no matter why you're looking at it. But there's more to this spectacular sight than just the mountain. The slopes of the mountain are covered in strange, hard-to-explain markings and indentations. And there are those who believe that at least some of the indentations are actually huge handprints. Looking at them, it's easy to see why. Applying some common sense to the question, though, they can't be. Just the middle finger alone on the largest of the alleged handprints is taller than an average man. Very little archaeological research has been carried out at the site of the mountain because it's in such a remote location. It's in the middle of nowhere between Del Durga and Taptana and lacks any roads to bring visitors here. The limited research that has been done says that the handprints are nothing more interesting than a natural rock formation, but the shapes look too specific for that. We're not suggesting that they're genuine handprints, but perhaps they're massive carvings of hands scraped into the rock by a forgotten civilization for unknown reasons. Thanks to breakthroughs in technology, we can now see things that can't be seen by the naked human eye. LiDAR remote sensing technology has been responsible for a flurry of recent archaeological discoveries, but perhaps none more important than this one from Tikal, Guatemala. We've always known that this was an important city to the ancient Maya, but until September 2021, we had no idea that they'd built a mighty citadel here. Without the assistance of LiDAR, these mounds look like nothing more than hills. With its assistance, though, we can see that the hills are actually artificial and contain countless ruined buildings. The most impressive of them is an 1,800-year-old citadel that looks more than a little like the world-famous citadel of Teotihuacan, albeit smaller. In fact, it looks so much like Teotihuacan that archaeologists don't think it's a coincidence. The building inside this mound was likely built to resemble Teotihuacan and represents a significant level of cultural exchange between the people of Teotihuacan and the people of Tikal. That's an amazing discovery, but the mystery here is that the buildings were buried so completely that nothing was left visible. That must have been a deliberate act, but we don't know the reasons why. Perhaps we never will. There's still much we don't know about the pyramids of Egypt. Whenever the technology used by archaeologists advances, someone always returns to the pyramids to see if that technology leads to any breakthroughs. In 2015, an international team of scientists and architects conducted a joint survey of the pyramids of Giza and identified thermal anomalies deep inside the structures. Higher than expected temperatures were recorded in 3 adjacent stones in an impossible-to-reach area at the very bottom of the Great Pyramid. Although empty spaces, different building materials, and internal air currents have all been suggested as possible causes for the anomalies, nobody's been able to say for sure. Further anomalies were detected in the Great Pyramid's upper half. The discovery came when the research team used infrared thermography to scan the pyramids as they heated up during sunrise, and then again when the sun went down and the limestone cooled. It's a virtual certainty that there are rooms and chambers inside the pyramids that we haven't been able to reach yet. But why would those chambers be warmer than the structure around them? Unfortunately, it might be several years before we find out. Let's check out another possible piece of space debris. This time it's one that some people believe to have alien origins. This huge alleged UFO fragment was found in the remote Siberian village of Otradnitsky in March 2012. It's about the size of a family car and weighs 440 pounds. Locals found it in the forest on the outskirts of their village and were so alarmed by it that they strapped it to a trailer and dragged it back to the village before alerting authorities in Moscow. The authorities sent experts from the Russian Space Agency who examined it and said it's not space technology, but not everybody believes them. Their analysis confirmed that the object is at least partially made of titanium and isn't radioactive. Officials from NASA have also studied pictures of the object and say it's nothing to do with them, and nor does it look like any kind of launch vehicle or spacecraft they're aware of. That's where the alien theory comes from. If it's not a piece of a spaceship that began life on Earth, maybe it's a piece of a spaceship from elsewhere. That's far-fetched, but nobody's been able to come up with a satisfactory logical explanation for its existence. Speaking of Egyptian discoveries, it was once thought that mummification was reserved only for the royals, high-ranking officials, and senior religious leaders. In recent years, we've had to reevaluate that theory. In fact, in January 2019, it was announced that a mummy that had been misunderstood for almost a century was the personal eye doctor of Ptolemy II. The mummy was taken from Cairo in questionable circumstances in 1925 and brought to Spain. Back then, 2,300-year-old mummy was thought to be female. After conducting a topographical analysis, scientists are now sure that the mummy is actually Nespomato, who was both a doctor and a priest and lived in Alexandria between 2,300 and 2,200 years ago. The scan revealed 8 plaques on different parts of the mummy's wrapping, one of which is a representation of Thoth, the god of ophthalmologists. It's rare to see this deity on a wrapping, and there are very few reasons for the plaque to be placed on a body unless the body is that of an ophthalmologist. This doesn't explain why Nespomato's remains were crowned with a wig, nor why his face was painted after death. So there are still mysteries to be solved here. A lot of what we know about the so-called Mojave megaphone can be discerned from its name. It's shaped like a megaphone, and it's in the Mojave Desert of Baker, California. Other than that, nobody knows anything about it. The large metal object is securely bolted to 2 rocks at the top of a 100-foot-high hill in the desert between Baker and Ludlow. Getting it here wouldn't have been easy, nor would installing and securing it. That suggests that it must have a purpose. But what could that purpose be? Is there some truth to the suggestion that it might have been used by the U.S. military to amplify the sound of a siren to alert locals when they carried out chemical or gas weapon tests in the area? If so, the military denies it. Are we looking at an art installation? That's possible. But the point of art is for people to see it. Erecting an installation like this in the middle of the desert seems to defeat the point. There isn't a clear history of when it was discovered or by who, so we don't even know how long it's been here. Nothing about the Mojave megaphone makes sense. The fact that an Egyptian pharaoh who lived more than 2,000 years ago even had a personal eye doctor is a reminder of how advanced the Egyptians were when it came to medicine, as is this next discovery. It's a prosthetic wooden toe, and it's thought to be one of the oldest prosthetics of any kind anywhere in the world. It's now in the British Museum, but it was found on a hillside tomb in Sheikh Abid Kurna, close to Luxor. Analysis of the artifact has revealed it to be around 3,000 years old. Archaeologists briefly thought that the toe had been added after death, so its female owner would be complete in the afterlife. But on closer inspection, it's obvious that the toe was adjusted and reshaped several times over the years to make it more comfortable for its owner, as their body and shape changed during their lifetime. It's likely that it was fitted when they were a young adult and stayed with them until they passed away. Between the anatomic perfection of the toe and the comfortable leather strap it came with, it would have enabled this woman to walk as if she wasn't missing a toe at all. We're back on the topic of space debris now, or at least we think we are. This large, unidentified object was found in the Polish wilderness in September 2020 by a walker in the province of Świętokrzyski. They took pictures of it and noted that the object was metal and badly weathered. When it was reported on by her local newspaper, readers wondered whether it might have fallen from space. The problem with that theory is that anything this large falling from space would undoubtedly have caused a crater and damaged the trees around it, which isn't the case here. The presence of several empty beer bottles scattered around the bottom of the object suggests that the walker wasn't the first person to come across it. The degree of weathering suggests that it might have been in the forest for a very long time, but that doesn't get us any closer to working out what it is. The newspaper proposed that it could be a large cement mixer. But why would a discarded cement mixer be in the middle of nowhere? Have you ever seen anything like this before? If so, let us know in the comments. We're leaving the Egyptians behind now, but we're still talking about mummies. To be more specific, we're talking about the mummy of an ancient Persian princess who was discovered in November 2000. She was dressed up in a beautiful golden crown and mask and placed inside a wooden sarcophagus. The whole sarcophagus was then placed inside a larger carved stone coffin. Helpfully, she was buried wearing a breastplate complete with an inscription that reads, "Am the daughter of the great King Xerxes. I am Raguni." She was the first Persian mummy ever to be found and was said to be 2,600 years old. Here's the twist. Almost everything we just told you turned out to be a lie. Although the find was reported at face value at the time, including all those details, it later transpired that the mummy was a fake. The grammar on the breastplate wasn't quite right, and there were anomalies in the mummification process. A further scientific study of the body showed that it had been dead for no more than 4 years at most and died of a broken neck. Either somebody stole a body to create this elaborate fake, which briefly fooled some of the world's greatest experts, or someone was killed by the people who pulled off the con. Crime's never been solved. There was a storm in the Welsh town of Barmouth in October 2021, and it disturbed the sand of the town's beach. Once it passed, residents were amazed to see that the storm had revealed the existence of some old train tracks that seemed to lead straight out into the sea. There's no historical record of a railway line ever existing on the beach, which makes the track something of a riddle. Some residents have speculated that they were used during the construction of a seawall during the 1930s. Others have wondered whether they might have been used to bring ships ashore for repair work during the days when Barmouth was a fishing town. In either case, you'd expect to find some acknowledgement of their existence in the town's records. Historian Hugh Griffith-Roberts says the tracks are at least 40 years older than the seawall and might have been laid during the 19th century during the construction of a new sewage system in town. These are all fine guesses, but none of them has yet been proven correct. Legend has it that there was once a mighty kingdom called Cant in this part of the world, but the kingdom sank into the sea. Maybe this was its railway line, or maybe not. Kadragan Minaret in the village of Minar, Uzbekistan is a beautiful landmark and an impressive sight. It'd be even more impressive if you were looking at it 800 years ago, because it was probably twice as tall as it is now. The 12th century minaret was built with an unusual wave-like style that narrows towards the top, thus playing with the perspective of viewers on the ground and making it seem like it reaches higher into the sky than it really does. The body of the minaret is made from 16 herringbone columns banded by 16 arches and covered in elaborate inscriptions. It seems that the minaret may have been double or triple linked, hence the damage at the top of the 70-foot-tall tower where the upper portions have been broken off. Archaeologists think that it may originally have been around 150 feet tall. Presuming that it continued to get narrower as it got taller, the minaret might have once looked like a giant needle. The informative inscriptions tell us that the one-of-a-kind minaret was designed by Ali ibn Muhammad of Sirax, which is now part of Turkmenistan. It also tells us that it was built between 1108 and 1109 during the rule of Sultan Sanja. Sadly, nobody thought to add a new inscription to tell us what happened to the rest of it. As a species, we've launched hundreds of objects into space, but not all of them stay there. Some of them fall back down to Earth, and most of them fall into the sea, but not all of them. An object falling from space seems to be the most likely explanation for this 90-pound metal sphere, which was found on a beach in the Bahamas in February 2021. The titanium object is covered in Russian writing, which furthers the idea of this being a piece of a Russian spacecraft. To be more specific, it might be a hydrazine propellant tank, which could have been a part of a satellite. The Russian text informs us that the object, whatever it is, has an operating temperature range between -170 and -196 degrees Celsius and a capacity of 43 liters, and that it was manufactured in 2018. If it's a hydrazine propellant tank, its job would have been to squeeze propellant into the thrusters or engines of a rocket. How it came to be on a beach in the Bahamas is unknown, but it could have been washed up there after landing in the sea. The Russians have refused to confirm that the object is theirs, but that's not necessarily a surprise. We know we said we were getting off the topic of Egypt, but we're going back there now to look at a very unusual mummy. In 2015, scientists were surprised to discover an Egyptian mummy with a head full of deliberately placed dirt. The 3,200-year-old mummy was scanned using computed tomography at the Stanford University School of Medicine in California. The scan told the scientists a lot of things, but the most surprising finding was that its skull cavity still contained the brain of the deceased person, along with a strange dark sediment. The unidentified material was added to the brain case at the time of the mummification, but the brain was left inside. Scientists haven't seen this before and speculate that whoever mummified the body encountered difficulties while trying to remove the brain, although brain removal was less common during the New Kingdom period. The overall impression is that the process was carried out by someone who was experimenting with different mummification techniques. So the adding of the strange material to the skull may have been part of that experimentation. It's unlikely that they would have been allowed to experiment on the remains of anybody perceived as important, which begs the question of who this person was and why they were mummified. Let's go from Australia to the United Kingdom for a mystery that's charmingly British. In October 2021, photographer Ashley Cooper was out walking in the woodland of Blee Tarn in the Lake District when he came across this strange sight in the middle of a forest. It seems that somebody came here and set up a table and chairs for a traditional English tea for two, and then disappeared off the face of the earth. It's such a jarring and unusual sight that I actually wondered whether it might be a guerrilla art installation. But upon closer inspection, he found that someone had eaten half of the cakes and drunk around half a bottle of champagne. There are no hotels or residential buildings of any kind within 4 miles of here. None of the items left behind are cheap, so it doesn't make sense for anyone to go to this much trouble to set up the meal and then abandoned everything once they were done. What happened to these people? Why set up a table in such a remote location in the first place? We have no answers. We've almost touched on the topic of brain surgery, so let's look back on a discovery from 2014. 2 bodies were found in Siberia's Altai Mountains that year, both of which showed evidence of healing after undergoing trepanation between 2,300 and 2,500 years ago. One of the skulls belongs to a man who died in his 40s and suffered a heavy trauma to the skull, leading to a hematoma. Trepanation would have removed the hematoma, and evidence suggests that the man went on to recover and continue living for several years after the process. This primitive kind of brain surgery has never before been recorded in bodies from this period in Siberia, and it's made historians wonder whether these ancient Siberians knew a thing or two about the Hippocratic teachings of ancient Greece. If they did, the experts would like to know how. Siberia is thousands of miles away from Greece. Is this evidence of the nomadic tribes of Siberia having contact with the most advanced medical centers of the ancient world? Or is it merely an example of parallel development, with the Pazyryks reaching the same conclusions as the Greeks at the same time? There was a mystery on Kent Beach in Queensland in October 2021 when this brown jelly-like blob appeared overnight. The initial opinion of experts is that this is a creature of some kind, most likely a jellyfish. But it doesn't look like any kind of jellyfish that's been seen before. Some people suggest that it might be a lion's mane jellyfish, but it isn't the correct size. Another suggestion was that it could be a tomato jellyfish, but that doesn't seem quite right either. It's still probably fair to assume that it's a jellyfish, but it might be the first recorded example of a previously unknown classification of the creature. That means it might have a sting, possibly even a dangerous one, which is why experts were so reluctant to touch it. The creature has since been taken away, but we're still waiting on an official classification. Perhaps this is a reminder that the seas are still largely a mystery to us, and there are potentially thousands of undiscovered creatures hiding down there in the dark. There are hundreds of cave impressions in the Foz Coa Archaeological Park in Portugal, but none as impressive as the horse of Mazuco. It dates back to the Upper Paleolithic era, which means it's at least 12,000 years old and might be far older. The horse is enormous, measuring 24 feet from nose to tail and displaying well-defined features. The ancient artists who created it must have spent a lot of time on there are more than 100 painted or engraved panels in the archaeological park with over 5,000 ancient engravings in total. Despite that, it's one of the least well-known UNESCO World Heritage Sites in Europe. That's a shame because there are few more beautiful. Anyone who visits the horse and its fellow engravings won't just be stunned by the quality of the work, they'll also be stunned by the breathtaking views of the surrounding area. It's no wonder these ancient people attached so much importance to location. Sadly, we know almost nothing about them other than the artwork they left behind for us to enjoy. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.